The meditation today is led by Karuna.
We all know that meditation is about inner silence. Inner silence. Calming the mind so that something higher than the mind can manifest in that silence. It is said that when we want to talk to God, we pray. When we want God or whatever you believe in to manifest, you create inner silence. What better way to create inner silence in this beautiful morning than listening to the song of the birds? 3 minutes with open or closed eyes. Welcome back to the present moment.
Our speaker today is David Truly, who most of you know from either his music or past presentations here. David will talk about general trends in retirement migration in Mexico, with a focus on the future of senior housing in the Lake Chapala area and in other parts of Mexico. David Truly received his PhD in geography from the University of South Carolina and was an associate professor and director of the Tourism and Hospitality program at Central Connecticut State University. He moved to Lakeside in 2010. He teaches at Autonoma University in Guadalajara and has also taught at local schools in the area. He has a consultancy firm that focuses on tourism, retirement destination issues, and education. He's also a member of the Tall Boys, but I don't need to remind you of that, probably. Let's welcome David Truly.
Good morning. How are you? Nice to see you all today. It's been a while since I've been here. For those of you that don't know me, we're going to try to talk about a number of things today. I'll try to move this back so everybody can see it. This is as much just an index for myself as it is for everybody else, what I'm going to try to talk about. I came first to Lake Chapala in 1997 to do research for a dissertation on retirement migration to Mexico because I needed a topic. There was nothing altruistic about it. I just needed something to do, and the climate was great, and we liked Mexico. And my wife and I said, we'll come here. And the fact that I actually wanted to be a professor is completely with a new track, because before that I was just simply a guitar player that owned nightclubs and restaurants and had a penchant for tequila. So that was basically, there was a point where I took a break and I said, I'll go back to school for a while, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I found myself getting a PhD and going to a university and teaching. Life is strange. A lot of you probably, when you look at the reasons why you're here now in this country and in this place, when you backtrack it, it's probably a pretty interesting story. I know that's one of the reasons I've stayed interested in this topic. And the other reason is because we're on the verge of the biggest demographic event in the history of the planet. Don't underestimate it. There are going to be more elderly people on this planet than has been in the history of this planet. Who's going to take care of them? What are the financial impacts? What are the sociocultural impacts? They're huge, and it's kind of been dismissed a lot, but I'd say it's right up there with climate change. Because seriously, if you start to look around at what's happening to countries and the cost of long-term care, insurance companies, and this whole industry, it's evolving very quickly, and it puts a lot of stress and pressure on families and on people. But at the same time, it also offers a lot of people a new chance, a new adventure. And so for me, it's a fascinating topic, and it's something that I didn't think I'd actually become one of my own study subjects, but things happen. I came back here in 2006-07 on my sabbatical. At the end of that year, my wife and my two little kids, my wife turned to me and said, why don't you go back and just send the checks back to Connecticut where it's cold, and like all the other Mexican guys do, and we'll see you when we can. We did that for a while, and then in 2010 I left the university, mainly because I found a lot of found some opportunities at the Autónoma University in Guadalajara to teach, and more than that, the ability to be here to watch what happens, because this is the oldest and largest expat community, arguably, anywhere in the world. The LCS is the oldest and largest expat organization as far as we know. So this is a good place for basically my laboratory, which makes you guys, yes, guinea pigs, sorry. That's okay. That's all right. I'm one of them too, though. See, that's what happened. But the point is so when I first came down here, my idea was just to take an idea, to try to understand what it takes for people to move away from home, and not just 50 miles or 100 miles or 500 miles, but to jump a border, to go to another culture. And so my first area was really looking at the typology. How do I develop, what's the typology of these type of people that go to these places and that make that decision? And that's a big decision, obviously. And basically it came down to two things. It came down to two questions. When I asked all these questions in 1997, I've done this from year to year, or every 5 to 6 years I'll do this. And basically it comes back to two things that always spin people into categories. And one is dissatisfaction with their home country. And it's not to say you're a political expatriate who hates your country. It just means that there's a level of dissatisfaction with the life that you have wherever you are. The second thing is some kind of affinity or appreciation for the Mexican culture or lifestyle. And those two things spun out, when I did my statistical analysis and factor analysis, these were the two questions that spun people into different directions. And what it led to is it led to kind of a matrix of people that dissatisfaction was important or not important, affinity with the Mexican culture was important or not important. And it came down then, I looked at some old literature, and there was a gentleman named Everett Lee, and he came up with the idea that really there were two reasons why people moved. One were positively selected people. These were people that basically didn't have to move. They didn't have to leave, but they did because they felt there was going to be something better. They weren't forced. It wasn't an economic decision per se. There might have been some factors like that. But the reality is that this was all about something better, a higher quality, a better quality of life, an adventure, something like this. So the other one was basically negatively selected. So these were people that are really kind of the epitome. So we have these positively selected people, and we have the negatively selected. Excuse me. These are the ones that don't have to move, but they do. The negatively selected are people that felt like, I have to leave because of varying political, like true expatriates, like the black jazz players in New York City who moved to France or moved out to California. People that because of political issues. People because of economic issues. People that are running from the law. There's a lot of those down here. You find them. I found them. But there's people that have to move, right? And so there were these two types of people that he found. And in fact, this worked in my typology also. But it also suggested that when I did that there were some other people here. And I realized when I first did this was right after the beginning of NAFTA and the introduction of the big W, Walmart. Walmart changed the world down here. Don't fool yourself. The availability of U.S. products and international products changed dramatically the types of people that would consider living here. The availability of the internet and all of these things has changed completely the types of people that were willing to come here. Before, these people would come, they would stay, they would lock themselves away. These people would come, positively selected, stay for maybe 6 to 7 years. Most of them would tend to go back. And that's generally the trend we've seen because usually that's when health issues kick in, return to family. This is what we see in people who move to Florida and a lot of areas. This is not unusual. But what I also discovered is what I called the new migrants. And these were people that because of the availability of these goods and services, they were willing to make that jump to come here. Because they can have all those things. For a lot of people, they would stay and say, this is great and the weather's great, but I can't get Skippy peanut butter. I can't get the things I like. When I came down here in 97, a lot of my interviewees just told stories about how they'd have huge parties when people came across the border with all the contraband. I mean, Jiffy peanut butter and all these products were like the big deal. The new migrants were here, and a lot of them didn't really have the real affinity for that Mexican culture. They weren't particularly dissatisfied with life. They wanted to live cheaper or better. Okay? Doesn't sound so bad. There's another group that showed up. And this is what I call the disenfranchised. These are these are people that due to economic or health issues, lack of family, become pretty much isolated. This is not new either. We have this all around the world. People that find themselves alone, solitary, for a variety of reasons. And what has happened over the years is every time I do this, this still works. And what we're really seeing now is we see that these people, the positive selected, are usually the ones that tend to stay the longest, that tend to stay here longer, and that a lot of them don't ever leave now, which was never the case, by the way. And it's very simple. Look in the Guadalajara Reporter over the last few years, and you see so-and-so died at their home in Ajijic. It used to be died at their home at their son's home or their daughter's home in Palm Beach or in Florida. That has changed. And I can tell you that talking with the U.S. consulate, the number of people that have died in Mexico has doubled over the last couple of years, every couple of years. People are staying longer. They're remaining here. This is a new trend. This was something that happened before. Why? Because there's more doctors, there's more hospitals, there's more amenities, there's more people here. And more importantly, you know what happens? People come here and they develop social networks that are as strong or stronger than they have back home. Because let's face it, back home, so-and-so moved away or so-and-so died. The kids have left. They're gone. They're not there anymore, so what's there? Memories of what used to be there. These are new memories. So this is kind of, so we're seeing this happen. And these new migrants, they come, and these are generally the ones that stay for a while. Sometimes they make a rash decision. It's pretty easy to come down here from like, you know, Ontario in February and go, this is heaven. This is great. Sure, I'll buy a house. And then 2 years later going, what happened? What was I thinking? I wasn't thinking. And it happens. But these are some of the factors. And the disenfranchised, who are these people? These are the people that I've interviewed over the years that are now 89, 92, that are still here, that in some cases have lost a lot of their friends, that are still here, and then sometimes they have no place to go, they're trying to make it work, or because of the loss of certain mental faculties, they're kind of isolated internally. So this is all happening here, and this has been going on for quite a while. So what are the predictors of the type of people that come here? What I've seen, the ones that stay the longest, it's very simple. It comes down to basically three things. Most of them have a pretty high residential mobility rate. I mean by that, they moved a lot in their life, whether it's for employment, job opportunities, whatever it is. And don't fool yourself. A move from New York City to South Carolina is another world. I know. I've been around, and it's a different world. And so even that cultural adaptation prepares people for something like this. There are people that come here. I met a man the other day, came here, was here 5 days, bought a house. He's been here for 5 years. He'll never leave. But you know what? He's moved 12 times in his life. He's lived overseas. He's lived here. He's worked for Ramco Oil Company in Dhahran. He's used to cultural adaptation. And that's an important factor. The other thing that's important is travel habits and experience. Travel, the more you travel, the more you want to know the people that really travel. Now, there's a difference between traveling to Cancun and San Cristobal de las Casas. Of course there is. Mass tourism places in Cancun, I believe honestly, they speak more English there than they do in Miami now. All right? And when you look at it, it is a place that has all the amenities and all the accoutrements of any city, the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, and things like this. It's all there. And yet, when you go to a place, let's say, like San Cristobal de las Casas, it's a step back in time. So the experiences that people have with travel, and when I talk to people and do interviews, when I get a little background on their travel history, it doesn't take me too long to say, I'll see you in 2 years, or I'll never see you again in a month. Because it's not, there's nothing pejorative about the fact that the people that don't need to be here don't need to be here. There's people that come and they try it, and it's a great experience, but it's uncomfortable. Educational levels. I'll have to tell you that in general, the educational levels of people that stay here are always higher than the average. And recently I was down in Merida and I saw it was just huge over the top as far as even not only master's but PhD levels. This is something, and this is simply because historically, teachers, educators have always been one of the largest groups to retire abroad. Has always been. Because they've always had an open mind to these type of things. Income is one of these strange predictors. It's really not a predictor. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it later about exchange. When I first started this, some of my professors said, this is going to be an easy answer. The answer will be the wealthiest people will go there because they can afford to do that. Completely wrong. The wealthiest people are generally always the first ones out. Why? Because they can. Because if things get weird, they can leave. If you don't have a lot of money, you can't pack up and say, I'm getting out. Things are getting a little dicey. I'm leaving today. You can't do that. So you weather the storm. And for a lot of people, the ability to come here and have a little bit more than you could have back home, the affordability, the climate, and all these other factors very much enter into why you stay. Health, huge issue. We're going to talk about it more. So if we look at the baby boomers and we look at who they are, and we look at what they look like, Baby boomers have the highest education levels of any generation in the history of the planet. They were the nexus for the travel industry. All right? These are the people, I talked to some people, yeah, when I was 21, I backpacked through Mexico, and I always remembered this place, and I came back. It happens. This is, it's memories, it's nostalgia as you get older. You look for these places. Also, educational levels, without a doubt, higher. Residential mobility, higher. If you look at all these factors, the baby boomer have all of these factors. So years ago, I remember when I first said this, people said, so when are they coming? And I said, this isn't going to be like all of a sudden they're just like storm the gates of Disneyland. I mean, but it's a process. And certainly over the time we've had security issues and all these other things, booms and busts and all of these type of things that have thankfully quelled the flow. Because one of my personal feelings is too many people too fast anywhere is always a dangerous thing. It can destroy, particularly in a place where some of the ambience, like the climate, yes, that's always here. But the relationship between the foreign and the Mexican community here is unique. In most tourism destinations, you will find angst between a lot of that because they see the wealthier tourists, they don't have the opportunities, all of these issues. This is a very unique place, and there's a few of these around the world, certainly, that are like this. But that's something that once it's destroyed is very difficult to bring back. It's like bringing back a culture. When you destroy a culture, when they lose a language, it's very hard to write and bring it back. The other thing that's important to know is that we're in a generational transition. We are at the tail end of the silent generation. These are people born 1945 and before, 1946 and before. And those people, 1946, the baby boomers coming up. Pardon me for this analogy, but what's happening is, yes, they are dying off. Right? This is a slow trade, and this is beginning. So what we're having here is this period in flux, which we've seen over the last few years. The real estate people always ask me, well, when's it happening? When are they coming? And I'm thinking, well, they're going to come slowly. But the thing is, you have to understand that there's these issues that have kind of come, that have happened over time. So we're at this nexus. And as we go into 2015, 2016, we're going to be coming to that point where the first baby boomers are now hitting 69, 70 years old. So as that happens, that's going to change dramatically the demand, because if we look at what happens, that 70-year-old has in the past been a very important age point for a lot of people. So let's move on to trends. What are some of the things that I've seen? I'm going to very quickly, sunbirds. I like this part. These are some of the things, and realize that I didn't really say at the beginning, but over the last few years I've worked in many parts of Mexico looking at some of these factors. And one of the things that's very interesting is we have the sunbirds, the snowbirds, and now we have the seabirds. This is my new. Who are the seabirds? Seabirds are those people that vacationed and came down to Cancun or Puerto Vallarta or Cabo, and they went there every winter, and they had a great time, or they had a villa and they had a condo, and they stayed there. And there is definitely a tie between tourism visitation and retirement destination choice. They come down to those places, they look at it, they go, oh, that's great, and they go and they develop some familiarity with the area, and then they retire and they say, we're living here full time. About 3 or 4 years later, they go, you know what's really hot here? As much as I like it, it's killing me. Because too much heat, too much cold, either way, the extremes are tough. So what happens is these seabirds are just like the birds. They come into the internal area. They come to the interior. We're seeing a lot of these people now over time that I've met that, yeah, I've been in Puerto Vallarta for 4 years, but I'm thinking of selling that house and coming here, or I'm going to rent here in the summertime, or vice versa. So you're seeing these other new migration trends, which are very, very important, because seasonality is always a difficult thing for a community. Just very quickly, when I first came here in '97, we had a big winter season, but nothing like this. I mean, there were a lot of people here, but we also had a true sunbird season. A lot of people from Florida, Arizona coming down. Due to the insecurity issues, the real estate boom and bust, that kind of tapered off, and so we've kind of, and this is difficult for businesses in places when you have a huge amount of people during 4, 5, 6 years, and then this drop off. makes it very difficult. So this last summer, I have to say, and over the last couple of summers, I have seen, based on anecdotal stuff from owners of B&Bs and things like that, certainly an increase in those sunbirds once again. And I think we're going to see that. But that's really good because it creates more of a healthy environment where you don't have these massive ups and downs, which is very difficult for tourism destinations or any kind of communities. The other thing is this is a brand new thing I'm starting to see. And I call them destination jumpers. These are the people, and this is really cool actually, because I was doing this, I really saw these, I saw them in Merida, but then I saw them here, and I saw them in San Miguel, I saw them in Baja. These are the people that are jumping. I'm in Ajijic for years, and I was in Merida, and this person goes, hey Dave. I go, hey, and I had this moment of deja vu, and I knew this guy, and he said, yeah, I know you from Ajijic, you moved to Merida. I said, how long have you been here? He said, I've been there about 2 years. He says, are you going to stay here? He says, stay here for about another year, and then we're thinking about moving to San Miguel, or maybe, and I'm going like, really? But you know what? You know why? It's because we live longer. I mean, it used to be, you retire at 65, you die at 72, man. You got like 8 years, you're good. You're going to live to 82, 85? As a friend of mine told me, it's like another career. What am I going to do? Right? You got a long time. One of the reasons why this place is so popular is because, and I think is important, is because of places like the LCS and organizations that have spawned out of here, community opportunities, charitable organizations, activities. These are important things because, there's that honeymoon period of a retirement when you get out and it's great and you can go out every night. But guess what? At 66, recuperation powers are less. I know. I play in a band. Let me tell you. That's why we don't play as much. It takes so much longer to get up the next day. So, it's harder to do things. So what happens is after a year or so of having fun, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to be satisfied? There's got to be something else. So these destination jumpers are people that can really, they want to, and there's different places can meet different needs at different periods of this time. I mean, we're looking at a complete reorientation of retirement, of what it means to be a senior. It's not sitting looking out the window. It's doing things. It's being active like all of you are, the things that you do. And because of that, looking for different locations that may take care of those needs at that time in your life cycle are going to be important. Probably one of the biggest issues, and everybody always asks about, is about health. There's no doubt that health has been one of the biggest issues for any retiree, for anybody. And what's interesting now, what I'm finding now, is it used to be, I'm going back to the States because my health is getting bad. But now I'm staying here because my health is getting bad. We have the Affordable Care Act, total transition of health insurance in the United States. We have Canadians that over the last year, when I went to the immigration office the last time, I always like to go in when they get mine, and when they turn away, I look at the little book to see where it comes from, because I want to see. And what you find is the number of people from Canada that are applying for permanent residency is staggering. And this has been verified when I talk to the migration people. And a lot of them still go back for their health care, but there's plenty that have figured out ways to get around that. Because in the United States, it's always been a question of cost. In Canada, it's been often a question of waiting time. Right? So when you look at these different factors, people are making much more independent decisions. And I will tell you this, excuse me, insurance, Medicare. Now this is U.S. specific, but if you look at Europe as what has happened, there's been migration from Brits and people from Sweden down to the Mediterranean area for years, and many of these places have developed mechanisms so that healthcare services are available in those countries. To me, it's only a matter of time. And I can tell you right now, I know of insurance companies that won't go on the record saying this, but I know that they've been sending down people to Guadalajara for surgeries for the last 10 years. And it does happen. And I can tell you, I've worked with a group called the Medicare Portability commission out of Washington, D.C. that has been actively looking at the idea of possibly developing pilot programs for Medicare in the Guadalajara area. This has been on the table for quite a while. When it will happen, I don't know, so don't ask me later because I really don't know. But there's no doubt that there's an impetus, and it's not just a cost. It's more of the idea of constituencies saying, because I decide to live somewhere out of the country, why can't I have my Medicare? I mean, it's just my right. I paid for this. And I think we're going to see this happen, and just like with NAFTA and with all sorts of trade arrangements, these are natural things that we've seen over time, and I think these things are definitely evolving. The issue with healthcare in this area and in parts of Mexico is you have to understand that you certainly live in one of the areas that's closest to, without a doubt, one of the nexus of some of the finest medical care in all of Mexico. That can't be said for areas down around Cancun and some of the Yucatan areas. There are places that are improving, or you can't say that really, I don't think, about the Baja region, although there's some great hospitals there. But this is a place that has really built its legacy around medical schools, Autónoma and some of the others, some of the largest in Latin America and some of the best. So this is becoming more and more of a thing. So as people go, it used to be I go back because of healthcare, but now people stay. And what's fascinating to me sometimes is looking at why people leave and the differences in this, because the health aspect is becoming increasingly an incredible factor in this. Okay, very briefly, because I want to get through to another thing, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about other destinations. I want to leave some time for questions, so I'm sure you have some. Hotspots, the Yucatan. Merida, without a doubt, has grown dramatically as a retirement destination, especially for people who want a downtown old colonial Mexico, because all the Mexicans have moved out. And all the gringos moved in. And with that, however, has come, like we've seen here before, inflation of prices, other issues like this. But Merida offers that beautiful old colonial Mexican charm. It also offers some of the hottest, most humid weather in your entire life. And as someone who was raised in Florida and has friends who live in, I mean, but the point is, you look at a lot of the retirement communities in Central Florida, this hot and humid areas also. There's a huge amount of people that are considering that area, and it's grown dramatically with the housing industry. I've also been doing a lot of work in the Baja region, certainly Rosarito, and I was talking with my friend earlier, but these are different markets. These are people that are border jumpers. And it's very interesting, when I look at those people, you see that they don't have the high residential mobility rate. They're a little more tentative about this, but they know they can get back, really quick, like 40 minutes. But you're seeing in the bottom, but these are also areas that are tourism destinations first and retirement destinations second. Now, Rosarito Beach is really turning into, this is a place, if you've ever been there, it's been littered by a lot of condos that went down in the bust. And a lot of these places are turning into more retirement-oriented type of places. And guess what? For the group of people that come out of Southern California that are used to living in those type of places, that's fine for them. Well, the important thing here is that every geographic place has its own market. And I believe that as we see this, we're seeing these niche markets develop in different areas all over the place. San Luis Potosí is very much unknown among retirees, but there's a small pocket of people there that don't want you to know about it because they like it there, and it has everything they want. And you can say this about like Pátzcuaro, you can say this about other little places all throughout Mexico. And as more and more these people get adventurous and younger, they're going into these areas and looking at them. Let's talk about Lake Chapala. What's happened here? Well, the permanent residents, over the years, we've had our issues with the security. We've had the real estate boom and bust, which affects people here dramatically. And it's resulted in an overdevelopment, basically. We have more houses than we have more inventory than buyers. Now that is changing. Real estate market is shifting, but there is no doubt that the rental market is booming. And why is that? Well, once again, I think two reasons. One is a lot of people were burned in the real estate crash. They're concerned about that as an investment strategy. The second is not being tied to that home offers a great deal of freedom. And this is why we're starting to see a demand growing for true senior housing. Because that even takes away more of it. The less responsibilities of taking care of these utilities, taking care of the home, taking care of the maintenance. When I first asked people about senior housing about 10 years ago, they're like, nah, I'm going to stay in my house till I die. I'm going to have people take care of me. I'm going to stay right here. I'm not worried about it. That doesn't happen as much anymore. It's kind of like, well, I've been thinking about it. And as I've done focus groups, people say, well, if there was really a good place, I might consider that. And certainly, we've seen a boom in mom and pop operations in this area that offer senior care facilities. What's happening here? This Ajijic is really, in Lake Chapala has really become kind of the portal for newcomers. It is a place where people come that are considering retiring outside of the U.S. and considering Mexico. It's an easy flight to Guadalajara from major airports. It is easy to get around this town. There's LCS. There's things here that allow people enough familiarity that no matter what their level of Spanish or mobility rates, they'll come here and they have the opportunity to experience this and to understand, is this for me? And this is what this place has kind of become in many ways. Demographically, still mainly a kind of middle income destination, although I will tell you that higher income people are coming here. A lot of these are people that are well educated, high residential mobility rate, and as opposed to the past, may stay here for the duration. We're seeing less lower income people, mainly because the Mexican government is starting to raise the criteria. The age shift. 7 years ago, I did a survey, 7 years ago, and the number of baby boomers was 9%. Today, it is 47%. Things are changing, okay? And I think it's probably we have about half of the population are hitting that 70 and older. And that is important because as that age grows, in the past, those 70 plus would likely within the next 4 to 5 to 6 years head back to their homes. But what experience is telling us is that that's not happening as much because they don't have a home to go to. The kids are spread out. They don't want to be a burden on their children if they have children. Some of them don't have children. Let's face it, we live in a world with a lot of strained and different relationships, and whether they're divorced families and this and that. So it's not like it used to be. And so people sometimes, and I had a wonderful woman friend of mine who was here for years and years, like 35 years, went back because her kids wanted her to come back home. She went back home. I saw her like a year later on the street. I said, what are you doing back? She said, well, I went home, the kids, yeah, it was great for a while. And we saw each other, and then they realized they were really busy and stuff, and they finally told me, Mom, why don't you go back where all your friends are? And it was true. She developed a social network that was as strong as any place else. Other things that are very important these days are things such as a concept we call aging in place. The idea that I don't want to move. In the United States, we had these retirement communities that you stay independent living, and you go assisted, and you move here. We now know that movement of people as they age from one place to another is probably as much of a traumatic issue, and it raises mortality rates and all sorts of things. So, what are we seeing happen now? In the last survey results I've seen here, this is what it says. It says that 85% of the people think there should be more senior housing options in Lake Chapala. We are seeing a growth of these mom and pop operations over the last years, ranging over the last 6 to 7 years, maybe 50 or 60 beds to about 120. The main factors people like it here is because of the affordability of it and also the compassionate care, which is something that's a cultural thing, which as someone who lost his father a few years ago, I can tell you is something hard to find in the United States very often. Primarily, these have been retrofitted homes. These are not really set up for elderly care. They're the doorways and these type of things. The accessibility issues are difficult, but it's overcome by these other factors. Activities and amenities are pretty much limited by the size of the population. There's no economy of scale to allow for larger group activities or the availability of these type of things. But what I'm starting to see also is this demand is continuing, And people are looking, and the people here that do have these homes are trying to find their little niche markets, whether it be for more assisted, more recuperation, the true independent living. There's only a couple of places that really kind of promote that because they don't really have the ability to do it on a larger scale. Senior housing industry is a new industry here, but it is happening. I can tell you there are major players like Belmont Village, which is a huge developer in the United States. It's now developing a kind of high-income place for Mexicans down in Santa Fe outside of Mexico City, DF. Group 180 out of Seattle has been down in this area. There's other groups out of California that are starting to move in the Baja region, operating homes. This is an industry, though, that's brand new. Think back years ago when the automobile industry wasn't here, and now it's all over the place. So now what we're going to have is we're going to see rules and regulations. And there's going to be, as always in Mexico, that always comes with some interesting side effects because you never know who's working for who and who really has the rules. But it is starting to have, and the reality is the Mexican market. When I ask my students at Atono, when I ask them, how many aunts and uncles do you have? 20. 18. How many brothers and sisters? 2. 1. 3. 1. The nuclear family that we have in the United States and Canada is happening in Mexico. And when we ask parents that are less than maybe 68 about their future as a senior, they say things like, I don't want to be a burden on my children. That is not a Mexican cultural trait. That is due to the development of Mexico. More education, more opportunities for the children to work in other parts of Mexico and parts of the world. All the same factors that lead to development of a developed country also lead to the development of a need for senior care. Because in Mexico, there is basically asilos and casa de descansos, which are kind of our old folks' homes, the really kind of dark vision we have of those type of things. Positive impacts of this senior housing, one thing I can tell you is that in this area there have been a number of people that have been looking to open and develop things. Very often, again, I've learned a lot about business in Mexico, and I can tell you, it takes time. Investors come from all over. They all have different ideas about how things can be done. But the fact is that they know that there's a demand here. And with these larger companies, it's only a matter of time. And when you look at the lower labor costs in Mexico, it really is a no-brainer that this is going to happen. This is happening all around the world in all sorts of countries. The Philippines, Thailand, all over the world are places that can offer affordable, compassionate types of care. One of the major reasons why I think senior housing is a good thing is because it's a sustainable option. There's a point when you can take 300 people and move into a community that feels good, that has the things they like, that doesn't feel like the U.S., but feels here, that has Mexicans working there and or living there, and gives people what they want. That means less homes are going to be built out here. This area suffers from a lot of issues such as water consumption, pollution, and all those things, which more development won't help. There is a wonderful ability for people to move into a place where they know that if they do fall, that someone's going to get to them. The older you get, the longer you're down, the harder it is to get back up. No matter if it's a heart attack, a stroke, a broken leg, a broken hip, it doesn't make any difference. So I think we've come to a point, as the critical mass has come to this area, that the time for senior housing it's going to happen. It's going to just happen here. It's going to happen in other parts of the world. Because this is a demographic event of which we've never seen a likely thing like this. And it's going to have a dramatic impact upon each and every one of you and your families. Because the important thing to remember in this type of business, and when people talk about it, you have two consumers. The first consumer is the person that checks in. The second consumer is the partner or the family member or the children who follow up when you can't take care of it anymore. And so it's a very complex and interesting kind of industry because it has to incorporate not just that person, but somebody else that has to be delegated to look after them. And this is some of the areas and things, for instance, that have been doing with setting up the wills and things that LCS does, and these type of things are so important these days because as this evolves, it's going to be a benefit for everyone to be on their toes to make sure their documents are in order, that information's in order. Because this is a place, while we do have great health care and great opportunities here, it's also sadly a place where your destiny is in your hands. So if you decide, I don't really need to go to, I'm feeling kind of bad, but not that bad, and 5 days later, you're feeling really bad, they come in and they check you into an emergency room, and guess what? It's too late. And this is one of the differences here. It really is, because it's not, and I'm not saying in the U.S. it's always that much better, or in Canada. But the fact is here, you know, they give you your results. They're yours. And so it's in your hands. And so the future for that is that as this happens, people have to be alert and be ready to admit when, hey, maybe it's time to go do this and to try this. And I think as you see this community grow, hopefully we're going to see affordable and I hope appropriate types of housing develop. I can tell you I've worked with people that have proposed some really ugly things, of which I said I'd have no part of and nobody else would. And I'm hoping that in the future there will be good opportunities for people that do decide to remain here so they can be happy and healthy all the days they have. Thank you very much.
We have some time left now for your questions, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few. But wait for the microphone. I'm sorry. Yes, hold your hand up and someone will bring you the mic.
Thank you. I support it. I agree with everything you said. Everything. And I've lived in 4 different places in Mexico. This is definitely the best. I also want to support the renting business. I've been renting here for 6 years. I have no worry about getting old or disabled because I have a cleaning lady who checks on me every 2 days to see that I'm okay. Last night, my landlady from Guadalajara came to visit me. She just retired. She said, Carl, don't worry. Don't ever move. If you get sick, I'll come down here. She owns the house next door, and I'll take care of you. So, I mean, this is it's paradise.
Yeah, no, I want to make a comment real quick because that is true. And you can find some wonderful people here. I have to say, though, that sadly I've also been witness to the fact when in San Miguel they have a program where people would call each other to make sure they're okay. And all this works pretty well unless other issues happen, which is other family members from the people taking care of you see an opportunity to take advantage of situations. One of the things I worry about is while there are some wonderful people here, sadly, there are, like in any other planet, you know, there are people that will take advantage of situations. And so it's always important to have backups. And that's why some people do. They have a very concise with their cleaning women and the family that's taken care of them. But sometimes there does, sadly I can say there have been times when that hasn't worked well and it has turned out badly. It's important that you have that faith in those people and that you also have another backup available also. Because, you know, they might be a son-in-law or somewhere else that sees an opportunity, and sadly there has been some pretty tragic stories that I've been brought in on people that have been defrauded. This happens in the States, this happens in Canada, it happens everywhere. You have to be careful. You have to be careful.
Hi, thank you very much. It's a great presentation. I was just wondering if you found any differences between singles who come down and couples who come down, and why they come down, and how long they stay, and why.
How long they stay together? No. Wait, you hit a hot. I never even really looked at this stuff, but I started looking, and just it happened when I was in Medellin more, but I've noticed it now, and I'm thinking of adding this as a separate thing. The number of people that come down after a new marriage is unbelievable. And I think what it comes down to, I think it comes like new wife, new life, new place. Or new husband. You know, it really is interesting that it does come. There's a lot of singles. Obviously the number of single women in this area, I can tell you, has gone from about an equal mix to about 60-40 females to men. I think that you bring in divorced, widowed women, men. Generally speaking, what's interesting is when couples are here, and realize a lot of them come here and they do separate while they're here. But you know what? That's also just a basic aspect of retirement. I remember when my dad retired from being a doctor, and my mom called me on the phone and said, "Your dad's here all the time, and it's killing me." You know, and it is. And so sometimes it's not a question of the place. It's a question of just the reality of you're two people that had very distinct lives, and now you're living very close lives, and sometimes in a very small community, and that happens. So, you know, these are dynamics. What's interesting is generally, in the past, it has been the women that usually will go back to be with family and kids if they have them. The men generally will kind of hang out. I mean, generally what I've seen, they'll try to make a go of it down here more, but you know what? That really is starting to change a little bit too, because as we come into this baby boomer set, we're coming into a group of people, and anybody that's willing to jump a border, there's a certain streak of independence that's going to follow. Now, when I talk to couples and I say, "Well, yeah, I love it here," and the other one's going, "Yeah, it's okay. I'm just going, okay." Well, that's a no-brainer, and it happens. People come because their partner does. And these things work themselves out. But I think as far as the singles, yes, there's differences, very much so. And I'm particularly seeing that with the female contingency. Much more women are taking off on their own. I said this is happening in San Miguel de Allende just as well. Not so much in Merida, but and certainly in the Baja area. So yes, there is. I'm starting to see shifts in that.
So much. This has been incredibly meaningful. We've been married for 55 years. We're wonderful together. And we also recognize that once something happens to one of us, where we are no longer able to function and the other one is healthy, the question is, where do we decide to go? Do we stay here in Mexico? Do we go back home? And each of us has somewhat of a different awareness of that, but we don't know exactly. But the main thing is, what happens once one of the partners is no longer healthy and needs care and the other one is in good health?
Well, I'll tell you what has happened is we see that many of the places here, and I have a lot of friends where one of the partners had a stroke or had some kind of chronic illness, which is finally the person couldn't take care of them. And these are people that are actually using the mom and pop or the smaller places that are around here. And some of them offer unbelievably great compassionate care. And that's exactly what they need. One of the areas where I have seen the most interest in what they call traditionally independent living places, where you're generally healthy as you go in, is the idea that people, and they won't say it in front of the other partner, by the way. They'll say it separately as well. The only reason I do this independent living is because I'm worried if something happens to him, I'd like to have some help, and if we're in here already, it's going to be easier. And this is where I think this becomes a wise decision, you know. And if you look at a lot of places, even in the States, a lot of them are couples, you know, and a lot of people. Independent people are generally more stubborn. They're going to be the one that, I'm going to hang on as long as I can. But when it's two of them, they're working with each other, right? So, and it's the idea that, yeah, I'd like to be in a place where if something did happen, I know I could get help right away, and we can still stay here. We don't have to move. You can stay. And this is why any of the places that I've seen that have come here are promoting this kind of aging in place with the development of apartments and homes that no steps, accessibility issues, you know, that you can stay right where you are and age gracefully. Unless, of course, issues like memory and dementia come in, which is better for everybody than at that point where you have to make some other decisions. But yeah, that's
over here, David.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My family is considering bringing a person down here for assisted living, and our current puzzlement is with the changes in the immigration laws. She's 500 miles from a consulate. It would be very difficult for her to go to get the permission, the immigration thing. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't want to be opposed because you know what? Immigration here is kind of like roulette. I mean, you can go in and win, and you can go in and lose. But it will get done. What I suggest is realize that a lot of this can be done online now. If you have somebody that can go on the immigration site, you can do your initial stuff online. If she comes down as a tourist also, it's many of the mom and pop organizations here have lawyers and people that will help with that type of thing. I've had at least 4 or 5 people that have come to me to bring down a single parent who's up in, Nebraska paying $5,000 or $4,000 a month, and they found a great place for him to stay. And I've had those then also that they died here, and I don't like to really promote any one group, but I mean, you have to look around. But the point is that they were able to help them with all the burial and funeral and immigration and everything. So I think the first thing is you try to find a group of people you feel comfortable with that could be a place where they might stay, and then see if they can help you, because they usually have the abilities through their lawyers to help with exactly with those type of things.
Dave, great job, thank you. I've been curious since I've been here.
Closer to your...
Talking to the straight little one. There you go.
What's the percentage here, just in the town of Ajijic, of gringos? And both, like, say, in January and July?
Well, that's a hard one because statistics here are pretty sloppy. It's hard to kind of tell. My feeling is that it's probably full-time in the lakeside area, probably around 12,000, okay? That's full-time. Now, during the winter months, I know that can swell just by, if I count up rentals and all that, it can swell to probably 25,000.
Oh, as compared to what total?
Excuse me?
Compared to what total?
To the whole population? The whole population is lakeside. You might get up from Cotepec to Chapala, you're probably looking at 80 to 90,000, something like that. So it gets into a 15% you might get to 20% during different times. It's pretty sizable. I mean, and realize this too, that there's a lot of people I talk to, I'm a full-timer, and I say, oh, you live here all the time? Well, not really, but I own a house, and I've owned this house for these many years, and I spend 2 months with my kids, and I spend 2 months traveling, and we have another place. One trend that I've really seen a lot of is dual ownership in homes. There's people that because they don't want to sell their home in the States yet, they can't get the money, but also if they find the ability to buy a smaller home. You talk to most real estate agents, you'll find that stuff under $150,000 that comes on the market and is decent is gone in a minute. Because it's a good place where they can kind of get in and they can test the waters before they make that big decision. So, it's a hard number. My feeling is this time of year, there's at least 20,000, people that are rolling around this area. And I think it gets up to probably around 30 when you really get into the heyday of like February. I think it's pretty strong. Mm-hmm.